Okay, here we go with the daily chess problem. We're going to do this tournament style. We're going to do it thinking of all the moves and then working out a winning solution and then play the moves once we have decided our solution is the best we can generate. So, I do not know the name of this Genrik's Rooks. I don't know who this Genrik guy is. I'm going to assume he must be a good player, because why else would you give his problem his name or her name, whatever. So the thing is, the good news, you have 4 pieces to move, one of which is the right move, okay? So objectively, there's not a whole lot of choices here to make. King to the F file blockades the pawn, which is a good move. You have basic stuff like, the thing is, we're trying to queen this pawn on b6. White's advantage in this game is that his pawn is just facing rooks. There's no king to block it. Our king is going to block the F pawn on one of those F squares, 1, 2, or 3 depending. Probably on F2, but so our king can block his pawn, his king cannot block our pawn. That's our advantage. So what we'll have to look for here is some kind of a tactical trick to allow us to play. For example, the brute force move is, what we would like to do if there was nothing going on is play b7 and then rook to a8 and then b8 queen. All right, that's what we'd like to do. Problem is, b7, rook takes free rook. We lose, all right? We can't do b7, so we can't move that pawn. Moving the king is not necessary. He can check us with f3 and we go king to f2. That's the same as us moving to f3 or f2 right now. So there's no reason to do that. So we don't move the king, we don't move the pawn. I'm telling you that right now. So by process of elimination, you have 2 rooks you can move. The 7th rank rook on d7 can move to any of these squares. All right, h7. I'm going to go through loser, g7 loser, f7 loser, e7 does nothing, c7 does nothing, b7 blocks the pawn, a7 blocks the other rook, which may or may not be good. This other rook, a1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are absolutely nothing moves. a8, free rook. That's garbage. We don't want to do that. The only thing we have left is rook a7. Now, the thing is, this is just by process of elimination. Our moves are either rook to c or e7 or rook to a7, rook on the a file to a7. Those are our moves. Now, only one of these moves creates a threat. Do you see which rook creates the threat and what is that threat? If you don't know, pause the video, take a couple of minutes to look at it and see if you can figure it out. It's important. If you figure it out, you'll feel better. If you don't figure it out, it's not a big deal. It's just one of those things. If you figure it out, it'll just give you more confidence that your powers are increasing. So here's the dealio. If you pause the video, we're back. Okay, so for those of you who didn't pause the video, and for those of you that did, if you guys who paused the video found rook on a to a7, jackpot, because you know what the threat is. The threat is, this is a basic threat. Rook checks on g7, king h8. Rook checks on h7, king g8. Rook on a to g7, checkmate. The rook's on h7, the other rook goes to g7. That's a checkmate. So we can move here, we can leave the b pawn alone. Rook to here, rook takes b pawn, we checkmate him in 2 moves. 3 moves. 1, 2, yeah, 3 moves. Rook on a to a7 is a 3-move checkmate threat. Now he can check us with a pawn, king f2, and then we'll execute if he takes our b pawn, whatever. So guaranteed, rook a to a7 is the winning move. He's got to defend our threat. Now he could defend it with rook g6 check, at which point you don't really want to play, well, maybe you do. You could play king f3. King f2 is the move that's probably the right move, but king f3 could work because rook g3 check probably doesn't do anything special. Now, I don't like it because it just gives him a tempo to get to rook to b3. So I would say if he checks us on g6, we go rook king to f2, and if he wants to play waste the time of rook to g3, let him, because it does not alleviate the well, it does alleviate the mate threat, but we're going to play b7, and he's in trouble because his move won't matter. So these basically toast. Rook a7. He's got really rook g6 check is his only threat of value that I see. King f2 on our part, and now we're not threatening to checkmate him. We're just gonna play. He can go rook to g3 if he likes. We would go b7. Now here's the funny part: if he plays rook to b3 to block to take our pawn when we queen it, well, actually he could do that with the other rook. Rook on 8 takes b8 would be the correct move. Rook 3, rook on b3 takes b8 would lose to the checkmate threat once again, but he would just take with the other rook. But we're just going to play rook to a8. This guy is toast. Rook a to a7. He's going to check us. King f2. He wants to play rook g3. We're going to play b7. If he wants to play rook to b3, more power to him. We're going to play rook to a8. That threat is to take rook takes rook check, king takes rook checks, and then queens. Okay, because the rook's on the d8, and then rook queen supporting the pawn, so he's toast. Okay, he wanted to do that move. We'll go. There we go. Yeah, well, good luck with that. Ah, grasshopper. Now we gotta be very careful about this move. Actually, you don't want to be dumb. We have check. No, we don't have that. You gotta be very careful. I can't take his rook because he queens with check. So we could just, oh man, I don't like this at all. The problem is we can't take his f8 rook. So, it looks like we have to play rook to d1, which I don't like. Rook to d1 to stop him from playing, well, you don't stop it. Jesus, that really doesn't stop it at all. I don't know, this is messed up. Well, king takes rook, he queens with check. We can't do that. And we don't have another move that's actually good. That is quite terrible. Rook d1, rook checks, king to there, queen checks. Well, I guess, you know. Oh, rook to d1, he rook checks there, yes. But he would play rook takes d1. That's the problem. Again, he's got that killer move. See, rook d1, rook g1 check, king e2, rook takes d1. We have nothing. So, man, I don't like this at all. We could queen. He goes there, we go there. That loses queening, doesn't do anything. The killer move looks to be the interference move of rook to f7. Who the heck figures out this move? Well, I did, but it's a super difficult move because the rook to f7 interference, if he plays rook takes, we queen with check. If he plays king takes, we play queen with discovered check. If he checks us with the rook, we go king to e2. If he queens, we play rook takes queen. This is the killer move. This is one of the best moves you've ever seen played in front of your face. That was literally fantastic. So now I have rook to a8. Rook to a8. Threatening. You can't take my rook. I queen with check. He takes my rook. I take his rook. And his pawn will die in, next move. Rook to a8. King takes rook. King takes rook. Rook takes rook. He can move his rook. And then I would just rook to f8 check. No, he would go rook to g. No, you can't go rook to g8. Because I took his rook. So yes, I'm going to play rook to f8 check and queen. So this is it. There you go. He's toast. Now we hit him with the classic. We're going to allow him to take this pawn because we're going to skewer him with an X-ray attack by playing rook to h8. This is an absolutely fantastic problem. Booyah! Now this is one of those deals where you just saw one of the greatest moves you're ever going to see in one of these sequences, which separates the men from the boys. That's just in case you wondered. How good do you think I am? Speaks for itself, doesn't it? Rook to f7, double exclamation. And it took me a while to figure this out. This one I had not foreseen. But, like I said, this move separates the men from the boys. None of the lower rated guys are going to find this move. It's a super difficult move. So, I don't know, that Genrich, he must have been the guy who created this problem. Man, that was an awesome problem. Don't you agree? That was an awesome problem. I'm completely impressed. Because that awesome problem was so awesome because it made me play literally a super move in rook to f7. I'm going to check this out and see if this guy is See if this is a more famous problem. I've never seen it before. It says Genrikh Altschuler in the Soviet Union, 1946. I don't know. That's not necessarily this problem. Nope. Beats the heck out of me. That's just the only guy I can find with that name. So I couldn't find any more about this problem. But this is a terrific problem because it made me play one of the greatest moves that I've played in all of problem solving. I'm super happy to have played this one. So, man, go through this one because this one's not obvious, as you can see. But, like I said, logically, Rook A to A7 is the key move because you're threatening the mate in 3 with check, check, and then the other rook checks here. So it gives you the time to play B7. And he did, you know, basically what I said he was going to do. He played the pawn check and the rook G6 move. Well, it wasn't check, but tomato, tomato. I really didn't think this, I didn't look at this entire threat, obviously, which is why it stumped me. And I was like, oh, you know what? This guy's got something going on. But in the past, I have done the work on endgames and other problems and different kinds of studies and what have you. And it's the experience factor that allowed me to go outside the box. And outside the box here is to go, well, none of these moves work. Rook A8 doesn't work, rook E2 doesn't work. You know, I calculated it for you. And so it was like, oh, damn, we have to try the interference move. There's some classical problems that have interferences where no matter how they take, and this is a classic one, he takes one way, we beat him with check. He takes this way, we check, we do the other thing. Super fantastic. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Go back and look through it again and again. This one is an ultra classic. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks a lot, guys. I will talk to you later.